Mr. Chairman, I make a motion.
Do we have a second? It's for the 2% meals tax as proposed. We don't have to have a motion, but I'll make a motion on that then for that. Madam Clerk, will you do a roll call vote on that then? It's for the, read the motion back, the 2% meals tax as proposed for balance in the budget.
So on the motion made by Supervisor Condit for the 2% meals tax increase as proposed, and seconded by Chairman Thompson.
Roll call vote, please.
Now, just for clarification, if I don't mind, this is for the budget as proposed,
No,
correct?
not for the
No.
budget at all. It's for that 2%
2%.
meals tax that nobody seems to want.
Carry on.
Supervisor Smith,
No.
Supervisor Tatum,
Yes.
Supervisor Condit,
Yes.
Supervisor Carter,
No.
Supervisor Leland Mitchell,
Yes.
Supervisor Ronnie Mitchell,
No.
Chairman Thompson.
Yes.
That's all.
All right, now, what is it? It passed 4-3.
Okay.
All right, now, with everything like that, unless there's an amendment, we'll do the budget. Consideration of adopting the county budget as proposed. Need a motion.
Make a motion we approve as proposed.
Need a second.
Second.
All right, now, what that was, you've got your book. You've got your book and everything that's in there. I know there's a couple that said they didn't like this, didn't like that, and so
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. I'm sorry, go ahead.
could I make a comment?
Yes, sir.
I think what just happened here is tantamount to extortion, in my opinion. I'm all for Ferrum getting their fire truck. All this is sort of cropped up. I was told that 2% was an option in the budget, which I understand it is. But I feel like the board was just strong-armed into voting for this under the guise of Ferrum's new fire truck, and I don't like it, quite frankly.
Yes, sir.
If we're gonna go down this road, and I think Mr. Mitchell did the figures pretty accurately, I came up with 29 million. Let's vote tonight to give the citizens of Franklin County a rebate on their taxes. I mean, this is absurd. We're holding all this money, and now we're gonna ding them for another 2 cents. I don't like it. It's not right.
Yes, sir.
And
I
that's
con-
my comment, and I
concur,
want it
Mr.
on the
Carter.
record.
Anyone else? Anyone else?
Well, you want to revote?
On the 2 cents?
Yeah.
We-
Can we do that?
You can't.
We don't have the attorney here. We can't do a revote.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not
I tell you what we can do. We don't have to adopt this budget tonight. And that'll give us time to do this and we'll call Mr. Carter up to go over this. But I don't like the fact of any board member not being comfortable with anything that's happened. I want to make sure that everything is copacetic and fair.
Well, it's
That-
not just the fact I'm uncomfortable. I'm here to represent the people in my district, just like the rest of you all. And this is an unfair tax.
I'm not here to
I
argue.
know you disagree with that.
No, but I'm not here to argue whether it's unfair or not on that. But the thing is, it was a vote. And it came to a consensus. And it's something that's just like anything else, like the president or anything else. When there's a vote, it's what it is. And That's just what it is.
Well, I
Now-
understand
now-
that, but I think the Ferrum fire truck was used as leverage on some of the board members.
I bought that up, sir, and that was not my intention, I'll tell you that. That's why I stopped it, because it was not on that. And as it was proposed, we've got to come up even with some more money to buy the truck, because it went up from, well, I don't know, I done heard 3 or 4 different figures tonight. But anyway, I know that the final figure is up around $600,000. And so, in there on that, but no, I want to figure out some way that we don't have to, because I don't want nobody to think there was extortion or anything out of the way until we run it by the attorney. It comes down to the fact that.
Well, if it's just me, I would like to hear from my colleagues. Do any of you all feel the same way?
I can offer some comments, Mr. Carter, if I may,
Yes,
Mr.
go
Chairman.
ahead, please.
I'll just add another wrinkle to this. We're sitting here talking about a 2% meals tax increase that was originally presented as an option to have a recurring revenue stream for capital projects. That includes fire apparatus. And I have been very firm in my position, going probably on my 4th request at this point. We should not be approving any fire apparatus expenditures at this time period. Hearing tonight about fire apparatus in this environment of a tax increase takes a lot of things for granted, and I agree with you, Mr. Carter. We are caught up at the end of this year. This board needs to acknowledge and set these public safety work sessions, because we have a rotation schedule that many of us are questioning the veracity of. So why are we sitting here talking about purchasing a piece of equipment, getting, in a place where we're just about caught up, when I can't sit here as a supervisor and defend the methodology and rationale of how we fund fire trucks and ambulances? So that's an added wrinkle here. And not only do I oppose the meals tax, I absolutely oppose debating the merits of fire apparatus, specifically in an environment when our county administrator proposed this out of the gate for capital, which includes capital projects across this entire organization. And cherry picking out fire apparatus out of that environment is not fair.
Anyone else? Ronnie?
I know you guys get tired of me beating the dead horse, but these apparatus are very important. What fund did we use to fund the difference on the Glade Hill Fire Station? Can you refresh my memory on that?
Capital reserve.
Capital Reserve. So you're getting ready to ask Brian about that
It
account?
was come out of the cap.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to comment. Being that the fire department that's due next for this purchase is in my district, it does strike home with me, and it puts me in a hard place, because the Ferrum Fire Department is one of the most active departments in the county, and they have something in this county that they're responsible for that no other fire agency in the county, and that's the college. We have the largest inhabited buildings in the county, and the largest buildings in the county that we're responsible for covering up there. And to delay this purchase for this fire truck, whether this 2% meals tax, or as was proposed, 1% meals tax, and using fund balance that I supported, and also utilizing the fund balance or budget stabilization fund, and not having a meals tax at all, has the money to pay for this fire truck, or whether it's a fire truck or a front-end truck or whatever. This money is a recurring, or whether we use the meals tax as recurring revenue, or whether we just rely on the budget stabilization, that money is going to support and pay for our capital improvement, whether it just happens we're talking about a fire truck. We can be talking about a fire truck, we can be talking about a front load truck at the landfill, we can be talking about police cars at the sheriff's department. These are all items that are paid for with our capital improvement. We can be talking about school buses. These are all issues that we pay for with our capital budget. So, I mean, I know the wording has been used and tossed around a whole lot that all this is going for just to pay for a fire truck at Ferrum. I don't think that's reasonable or fair. I think the money that's needed for this item is to cover a gap in our capital budget, period. And as I said earlier, when I made my motion to scrap the meals tax for this year because it didn't look like that the mood was here to pass a meals tax increase and utilize budget stabilization, we can't do that for so long, and we're going to have to pick up some recurring funds somewhere. Hopefully, by that time, the economy turns and things get on the right track. I'm not a fortune teller. I can't look in the future and tell. But to put all this off on a purchase of a fire truck, for me, is not fair. It's not reasonable. This money is needed to cover the budget, proposed budget for capital. And, we've been picking on the fire truck at Ferrum the whole time. Part of this is, $400 and some $1,000 request that the sheriff needs each year to replace his cars. Am I saying, do we need to not replace his cars? Oh, no. If I've been through that. If we don't replace these cars for him, then he'll spend the next 10 years trying to catch up. If we don't make this fire truck purchase this year, we go a year behind, we're already behind. That truck that we're talking about replacing is close to 30 years old. And when the big trucks like this sit around with a load, they get unsafe to drive, and that's why we need to replace it. Now, whether it's utilizing the meals tax for the recurring revenue or whether it's using the budget stabilization to cover this purchase, we need to make sure that we make this purchase so that we don't fall farther behind than what we already are. I supported the 1%. I supported not having a tax at all. I supported the 2%. Because I do think the meals tax is a user tax, and a user tax is more of a fair tax than in real estate, in my opinion. But that's my opinion. All of us are entitled to them. And that's just where I'm at. So I've offered my ideas. If someone's got a better idea of what we can cut or do without cutting out this purchase of this fire truck, I'm willing to listen.
I'm gonna take we need to take a 10-minute break and get this, just need a break. Just being accused of extortion, that bothers me. We gotta figure All right, we'll get, well, Tommy?
My motion.
Sir.
Ready for me to make my motion?
Just a minute. All right, we're going to do a couple of things that never known to be done before, but it's going to be the way it needs to be done. Tim, you got a,
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I will remove or withdraw my motion to pass the county's budget as proposed.
I didn't know we had a motion to approve the county
yeah,
budget.
we did. He'd already made the motion to do that.
Was it seconded?
Yeah, second and everything.
Okay.
And so, no, we didn't vote, so we needed, we just let it go then, don't we? But
Yeah, as long as Supervisor.
that we,
Condit-
as long as Supervisor Cunning's willing to go along with withdrawing his second. Okay. So we're not gonna work on the budget right now. All right, now, I'm going to bring up another motion. Since we've already had the thing on the meals tax and it was approved. But because I am on the prevailing end and have been accused of extortion, I'm going to make a motion that we withdraw the meals tax vote as it's been presented.
Second.
Now, do we need to do a vote on that since it's been, we need to vote on that, don't we?
To withdraw it, I think so. Yes, sir.
It's been to be withdrawn, and so it's roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Tatum,
Yes.
Supervisor Condit.
Yes.
Supervisor Carter.
Yes.
Supervisor Leland Mitchell,
Yes.
Supervisor Ronnie Mitchell,
I have no idea what we're doing, so I'm just going to say no.
Supervisor Smith,
Yes.
Chairman Thompson.
Yes. Okay, now as far as the budget as has been proposed, the biggest thing we had to do tonight was to come up and set the tax rates. That's been done. As far as working on the budget now to make it, to work out and to become, be adopted, we've got to do some work on it because it cannot be done the way it was tonight, as proposed. We've got this paper. What did I do with it? From Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter, will you come to the podium, please, and explain your paper to us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what you have in front of you is the appropriation, the annual resolution of appropriation for the fiscal year 2023 budget. So, of course, this has the information in it as proposed, so we would need to amend this before any formal vote would be taken. But the language of the exhibit, so on the first really 4 pages, is the resolution itself, which would basically say the board votes on and appropriates these monies at the cost centers presented in the exhibits and the attachments at the back, and that money is appropriated to the school board and the social services board, all of the other agencies that are part of the budget, authorizes any rollover funds for grants or donations, things of that nature that are restricted that would not be spent at June 30th, 2022. And then authorizes reappropriation of any remaining capital balances in the accounts at the end of the fiscal year as well. So all those just roll over with whatever we end the year with. So that's the short language of what's in the resolution, basically. And then the exhibits or attachments A and B. One is a summary of the revenues, and then attachment B is a summary of the expenses. So as we stand now, I'm not really sure where we stand on the meals tax, but assuming it's not in there, then that meals tax number about the middle of the page here would be reduced. Right now it's $1,898,596. That would be reduced by $600,000. And then we would either have to amend revenue somewhere else or amend expenses to balance the budget.
Anyone got any questions for Mr. Carter? Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Yes, sir.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. What accounts we got money in, buddy? We need 600 grand so we can go home. The biggest question I have is why do we form $1 million budget stabilization fund? One, why do we have capital reserve accounts? Two, why do we keep setting up all these accounts for these great ideas and then when we need it, we don't use them?
So the reserves that we have are usually dedicated for specific purposes. And typically that purpose is either for a capital project to build a balance, or it is a reserve to use for operations as needed should revenues not come in as projected or costs overrun the anticipated budget that was adopted. So to give you an example, and I didn't come prepared to put the presentation up on the screen, I can certainly pull that up. We have reserves for reassessment, which needs to be dedicated to the every 4-year reassessment. We have 100,000 juvenile detention center reserve. I think we're going to need that this year because of costs going up on their per diems. The regional jail reserve is just under 500,000. Their per diem is going up significantly. I would recommend not touching that reserve. We have a landfill reserve at 183,000. I would not touch that because we're getting ready to construct a new cell at the landfill. That would help offset some possible costs at this point. We have a planning reserve of a little over 100,000 as of today. That is for future village plans, things of that nature, so it could be used. I don't think that there's ever necessarily anything dedicated specifically as far as contracts signed right now, but then that would have to be replaced in the future. We have a capital reserve, which you did reference, about 103,000 left in that. That was, a good portion of that was used for the Glade Hill Station. No. The rest of the fund was used for our line of credit to be able to balance that out to construct that project. We took about $1 million out of the capital reserve. There's a health insurance reserve of 110,000 should claims, we have some high dollar claims and they just come in higher than needed to help balance the budget, or we have a really bad year where we propose something and we had basically everybody went from single coverage to family coverage in 1 year and we didn't anticipate that. That would help balance the budget for the year. Then we have the $1 million in budget stabilization, and then we still have 61,000 in our COVID contingency for future PPE purchases and things future should we need it. So the budget stabilization recommended by Davenport, and it's just another, I'll call it a savings account, essentially is what it is. So there seems to be a little confusion on what fund balance is and what budget stabilization is. If you'll give me a minute.
Please.
Budget stabilization is specifically for if you have a downturn in your economy or your budget in the middle of a year, that is used to help get you to the end of that year or to a period of time where adjustments can be made in that budget to cut expenses. It is not a capital reserve. It is really not to be used for capital items. It is really an operating reserve to allow flexibility to respond. The unassigned fund balance is really just the other savings account, just like it says. It's unassigned. It can be used for any purpose the board dedicates. It then graduates to a different level of fund balance depending on board action. I won't bore you with the accounting details of that. But so what we have looked at, and usually what Davenport mentions, is that the budget stabilization was a new item we just put in this year. It's more to be a little bit flexible in amending our budget if we need to for an operational standpoint. The unassigned can be used for anything. We do have our policy minimum of 20%. I would recommend that you keep, because just like that budget stabilization, you could have a bad year. I would recommend flexibility to keep around 2 to 3 million above the minimum 20% anyway. Because if you hit the 20% minimum and then you have a loss for the year, now we're behind and we have to catch up. And that could be significant cuts to the operating budget in order to write that, okay? Yes, sir.
All right, before we move forward,
Okay.
please. So 23 million is the 20% policy minimum right now.
About 20, yes, 21 and a half.
2 to 3 million, which 100% agree on.
Yep.
I'm okay with keeping more than that in there.
Yeah.
We got 7.8.
We do.
Twice your tax collection money coming. So we went from having 29 million to now, we only have 26 million that we can pull money out of. So just want to make sure before we move forward that we're keeping all these big numbers in our head. So thank you.
Yes, sir. And that twice a year, which we don't have yet, so I'd certainly recommend not dedicating it till we have it. But the biggest thing on that is if we decide to move forward with future capital projects, a la a career technical education center, along other capital projects that is in the CIP, that is intended to be used for debt service to fund those projects, the construction of those projects. Otherwise, without that money, there would be probably a 2 to 3 cent equivalent of real estate tax increase needed at the time that debt would be borrowed. And so all of those things are things that Davenport would look at when we want to look at the spending the use of that money. So that any action we take on spending it or allocating or dedicating it certainly has an impact for future projects and the funding of those based on our current tax structure.
Mr. Cundy, if you had something to say.
Yeah, I want to make one statement. Our job in the board is to make sure we take care of the future. And just because we got two-time tax money coming, if I'm not mistaken, they told us to put that in the bank, then borrow against it. If we start nitpicking it, we ain't gonna have any money at all. Then you're gonna be back on fund balance. Fund balance, you gotta maintain so much to keep our credit ratings. And it's pretty easy to spend money. It's harder to save it. And we need to watch what we're doing as far as our money is concerned, because the public expects us to make sure this county is run correctly and keeping our money ahead in case something does happen. Now, get to my point about the fire trucks and stuff. This is on carry every year, correct? Our fire trucks, ambulances.
Ongoing need.
So why do we have it under capital? Because I thought capital was just for one-shot deal.
No. The definition of capital is typically larger purchases. We kind of say $50,000. The thing you're going to come into is you still have recurring replacement in capital. The only issue is you only replace one piece of equipment at a time, but it's still recurring. The sheriff has to have a fleet replacement every year of usually 10, 11 vehicles actually is what's budgeted. The fire truck would be one option. IT equipment, our PCs, our computers, they have an end of life about 5 years. So while you're only going to buy that PC once every 5 years technically, depending on who it's assigned to, you still have to have a recurring pot of money to plan that out, and you just replace and rotate what's replaced every year. So even though it's capital, it meets criteria for that from the dollar amount of the replacement. You still need a recurring funding stream to pay for your capital in order to keep up with it. And that's the $2.4 million we have now, and that was the intent of trying to find some additional money with the budget as was proposed.
But I think it was the intent of our financiers to say that we need to take that two-time money and put it in the bank and
Yes,
borrow
sir.
against it. If we don't, we're gonna have to raise taxes.
That was, while that's the proposal as of today, that was Davenport's recommendation, and what they costed out was based on data given to them by county staff based on future projects and costs. Of course, whether those projects move forward obviously changes that model, but the last time they were with us, yes, sir, that's correct.
Well, out of a $180 million budget, or 185, whatever it is, $26 million ain't a whole lot of money. And we can blow that pretty quickly. 2 fire trucks, front loader. I still support the 1% because I think it is needed. We want to pull so much money out of fund balance or the other. But anyway, I appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I go back to my days as a bank board chairman, and it was a large bank we always looked at money in the pipeline, money that was coming in. Personal property is gonna be bumped up this year because everybody's vehicles are up, and I think in this budget, our county administrator and Brian said you had figured that very conservatively. As I said before, meals tax is probably gonna go up anyway because of the cost in food in restaurants and that sort of thing. We're also looking at a real estate reassessment in the future, which is probably gonna be tremendous. I just can't see this tax. I'm all for using some of the unassigned fund balance moving forward. 600,000 out of that, out of the 7.8, it's a drop in the bucket. And if we want to, we can replenish that with some of this other money coming in. Would it be appropriate for me to make that motion now? Can we vote on it
Well, we
again?
got, I'm gonna let everybody wants to talk.
Okay.
Somebody down here raised, Tim.
Mr. Carter, over the last 3 years, about on average, how much has our unassigned fund balance gone up annually?
Give me just a minute.
Okay.
Okay. So what I'm looking at is our general fund surplus, which I mean is county only, not including the school system. Typically, the board has reappropriated that money to the school system for their request. So the last 3 years, in 2019, it went up 2.8 million. 2020, it went up almost 3 million. And in 2021, it went up 3.7 million year over year.
And those funds were largely because of CARES Act money and federal money that we received. Is that correct?
I would say there are two things. One, within here contains the general reassessment of real estate. So there was some conservative budgeting there, and a big chunk, especially when you look at 2021, at the 3.7 million was savings from the CARES Act money that will be one time and not recurring. You're correct.
But without if we took those out of the equation, we still typically annually, our unassigned fund balance grows every year, does it not?
It has. So historically, before the last 3 years, it's usually been somewhere around maybe 500,000, few hundred thousand. It actually dropped almost 500,000 in 2018. So, but you are correct. It has historically been less than $1 million, typically more about 500,000 on the county side for a growth.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Smith?
Mr. Carter,
Yes, ma'am.
couple simple questions. No curveballs. Prior to this year, how have we been funding fire apparatus?
We have been, prior to this year, we have been funding fire apparatus from year-end surplus or fund balance, as the case may be. But typically, it's year-end surplus when we get to September or October and see what we have at the end of the year.
So on this resolution, on the adopted revenue page, you're showing a capital fund number of roughly $4.4 million, correct?
Yes, that is inclusive of the school 1.4 million
That's,
as well.
so 1.4 is built in there, and the rest is capital revenue, correct?
The rest is, yeah. So the total is, excuse me, I said 1.4 million for the schools. About 3 million would be the county portion of local, which includes the meals. Without that, it would be about 2.4 million in recurring. So
Okay.
that, you're talking about the 4,456,775?
Yes, so I know that we've been trying to put 200,000 per year
Yeah.
in capital
Yes,
for the county and then the schools, correct?
that's correct.
Okay. Is that 200,000 in this budget?
It is now as part of the 600,000 with the meals tax with what you have in front of you. Without that, no, we were not able to fund the additional 200,000 increase for the county or the schools this year.
All right, so that's a choice we're making.
Correct.
And so if we just look at the county side of that 200K, if, do the math, we've got a gap of about $400,000 if we funded the 200 as we normally would,
Yes, ma'am.
correct?
Yes.
Is there a rationale that says that we do our normal funding and then we plug the gap of 400K if that fire truck must be purchased this year? Okay, that's my question. Because, you know, we've been having fairly healthy surplus and carryover numbers. And we need to be in that position, without question. This is rising to the level of what's being suggested as a tax increase. And we've been funding apparatus out of surplus and carryover monies.
Yes.
This is a decision that I view as precipitous under the circumstances, having it be a tax increase. I would submit to this board that we get our game plan on, gentlemen, and that we continue with current practices until we get our arms and hands around where we are with some of these issues in funding apparatus and capital. I mean, it is a discussion that warrants in-depth discussion, I think, by this board. I don't fear that we're not going to be able to get the Ferrum fire apparatus. I don't fear that whatsoever. It does not rise to a tax increase. We're not putting in the 400K for capital allocations. That's fine, but that 200 going into capital as normal would leave a 400K gap. I just want to point those things out because the narrative on this is, it's complex once you start thinking about the funding sources and how we're funding what and taking the long view. I absolutely agree with Mr. Cundiff. We must protect our fund balance and our recommendations by our financial advisors. We have to take a long view. We are going to be hit with a recession in the near future. I'm convinced of that. We better be in a very cautionary posture moving forward. Millions of dollars aren't going to go far over a period of 5 to 10 years in a $182 million budget. So I'm not quite sure why we just don't consider status quo of how we've been funding our apparatus and get through this period of volatility, market volatility, see where we end up, and in the interim, be getting that plan together for how we're going to spend money in public safety, as an example, and funding our other capital projects that we know are on our radar. So, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to share those thoughts and offer those in consideration of how we move forward.
Thank you. Ron?
Just a comment. The $5 million for the Glade Hill Fire Station, be nice to have that back right now, wouldn't it? You know, I'm hearing comments from other board members about, you know, being conservative and, you know, for $1 million, $1.5 million, we could have done what the Glade Hill Volunteers wanted down there, and we could have saved the county millions of dollars. But if we're going to talk about conservative, and now we've got a fire department that needs something, we're sitting here still talking about $600,000 when, in my opinion, we have plenty of money. You know, people that don't want to do it now didn't seem to have a problem when we spent $5 million on a fire station we didn't need. So I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
Is that everyone? Well, we've got to, I don't know, everybody sit here wanting to hear what I got to say, but I don't really have a whole lot to say. I've already said it 40 times. I don't know where it came up in the past that this twice a year tax collection is coming up with all this extra money, but it's not. It's a budget, and it's getting money that we're going to get. It was just getting it 6 months earlier, and it's needed to pay the bills of the county. I mean, I'm listening to Davenport, I'm listening to our financial director right here, right now, talking about if things keep going the way they're going and we keep spending the way we're spending, we're gonna be up potentially, is what I understood, 2 to 3 cent tax increase on property tax. That's what we're looking at. It could go that way. And nobody knows, nobody, unless you got a crystal ball, what inflation is coming. I mean, I am seeing and smell, and I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer at all. And I'm sure there's people in here right now thinks I'm stupid as I can be. But I can see and smell 2007 coming all over again. That's where we're headed. And spending money that we don't even have. It's just unorthodox. It just, you can't do that, and it is not extra money. And I am not gonna vote to take any money out of our fund balance. It's just like you call that fund balance what it is. And Mr. Carter just said it. Mr. Davenport from Richmond has said it. We've got this pot of money that's recommended. That is my savings account, like my savings account at home. Now, if I start tapping into my savings account and I can't put it back because it is what it is savings, especially if you start using it for reoccurring expenses and everything. The thing that I don't like, and I've said this numerous times, I don't like taking money, or taxes or anything, and designating it to a cause. That gets you in trouble. Because you've got to, once that's voted on, you got to keep doing that. You got to keep doing that, you got to keep doing that. And I know of municipalities all the time that have gotten themselves in trouble because of doing that. And that's not, so that is the way it is. Okay, now, if, I wouldn't block anything if you want to call for a vote tonight on the budget as presented, but we got to come up with a way to balance this budget. So you got to come up with a way to balance the budget. Or we can go, let's see, tonight was what, number 15? We can go to number 16, another work session to figure this out. So, Mr. Carter, are you determined you want to make a motion tonight? Or are we going,
Well, let me ask Mr. Carter, repeat what you said Davenport told you about the overage in the unfunded balance, the 7.8 million. Did you say that was at the board's discretion? We could utilize that money any way we saw fit? Was that your comment?
The unassigned?
Yes.
So unassigned fund balance from, a term by nature of the description, it has not been dedicated for anything. Now, what Davenport will tell you, they can't set a limit other than we have our 20% policy minimum. They typically say make sure the cardinal sin is to use it for operations and recurring. But typically, if you want to use it for one time, it depends on the plan. And I can tell you, when we've talked to the rating agencies, we always have to prepare financials for them. And the first thing they look at is when they see fund balance or beginning balance use in our numbers, the first thing they ask is, what was that used for? And we have to go through and explain that was used for these items. And usually, we've been very judicious, this board, previous boards. It's been for one-time specific purchases. Once you explain that, the rating agencies move on. If we use a large bit of it, they might question. But from a standpoint of if there's a planned drawdown, we have a plan for use, we are still well within our policy limits. I think ultimately Davenport would say that's the discretion of the board to use that money. The biggest thing is just small measured approach to how we spend and ultimately setting where that number needs to be.
Okay, with that,
hold on just a minute. Ronnie wanted to say something else.
I'm trying to remember last year, with the schools, are they part of just voting on the budget, or are we going to vote on them separate?
No, it's all part of this.
Part of this budget?
This book right here, Ron.
Yep, so the comment, I just remember us voting on it separate one year, but my comment would be, from what I understand, they've got to get contracts out, so we got to let the school system know something tonight. So I don't support
What was
having
that
another.
again? Say that again.
They have to get contracts out. They're losing teachers. So we need to let them know something tonight, whether it's approved or not, so they can let teachers know that are wanting to renew their contracts, because I know they're losing teachers.
Okay, anything else? You got a,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion to make up for the 2% meals tax. Rather than do that, we take 600,000 out of the 7.8 million to balance the budget, and we replenish that money over the next year from the twice-year tax collection back into the fund balance, the 600,000.
do we have a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, will you read that back, please?
Yes, on the motion made by Supervisor Carter to approve and appropriate the budget as presented, with the $600,000 coming from the unassigned fund balance, with the caveat that we will replenish those funds with the twice-a-year windfall. Seconded by Supervisor Tatum.
Madam Clerk, we do a roll call vote, please.
Yes. I believe I'm on Supervisor Condit.
No.
Supervisor Carter.
Yes.
Supervisor Leland Mitchell.
No.
Supervisor Ronnie Mitchell.
Yes.
Supervisor Smith.
No.
Supervisor Tatum.
Yes.
Chairman Thompson.
No. Didn't pass. All right, we're gonna have to come back. We'll work on the budget as proposed.
I just got an old fable that I read in an old book last week. And it says a lot of people become poor trying to be rich. And, you know, you think about that just a minute. And I'm not saying this applies to our budget, but I'm just talking about everyday living. Where do we go? And that brings me to a point of our fund balance has been there for many years. It didn't accumulate over 3 years or 5 years. It accumulated on all my time on the board. And I'm very positive to preserve that to all we can. And when you look down the next 3 years of cost and expenses that we can't avoid, and when you look at the fact that we can't avoid them, they're going to keep reoccurring. And do you see anything in our federal government that's given us any hope of balancing out? Or, you know, we get these big chunks of money that are put out, but do we ever see any effect of them? But anyway, I'm just conservative. I came on the board that way, and I'll leave that way.
All right, we'll have to have time in our next meeting to come up with a solution to balance the budget at that point. Okay? All right, then we've got to, Mr. Tatum, you want to read? We've got to go into a closed session. It shouldn't take long. Shouldn't take long for some direction.
All right, Mr. Chairman, Franklin County Board of Supervisors will motion to enter into a closed meeting in accordance with 2.2-3711A3, discussion of the acquisition of real property or the disposition of real property of the Code of Virginia as amended.
Need a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, we do.
Supervisor Ronnie Mitchell. Supervisor Smith.
Yes.
Supervisor Tatum.
Yes.
Supervisor Condon.
Yes.
Supervisor Carter.
Yes.
Supervisor Leland Mitchell.
Yes.
Chairman Thompson.
Yes. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Brian, thank you
We're
very
going
much.
back in the,
Thank you.